He built an empire behind closed doors. She was the only one who knew his soul. But when betrayal cuts deeper than love, will revenge be enough? Will the truth destroy them both? My name is Samuel Hayes. I'm 37 years old, and for 12 years, I've carved out a reputation as a ghost in the world of private equity. From my headquarters in Denver, Colorado, I orchestrate investments through layers of shell corporations and silent partnerships, obscuring my hand while guiding the flow of millions. Few know the extent of my reach. That's by design. But all of that meant nothing, standing in the polished kitchen of Robert Kellerman. Robert, my father-in-law, had been delivering the same speech for 3 years. It always began with some variation of how his daughter, Alina, deserved better. As he raised his coffee mug in disdain, I felt the same sting I'd grown used to, only this time I felt it deeper. Alina sat silently at the table, her fork moving, idle circles through her scrambled eggs. No defense, no protest, just silence. He mocked my work, suggesting I could be an insurance salesman for all he knew. Alina half-heartedly mumbled something about finance, but even that lacked conviction. I'd watched her shrink from the confident scientist I married into someone afraid to challenge her father's anger. Robert wasn't just overbearing. He was vindictive and blind to his own failures. His biotech company, Nexera Labs, had been bleeding money for nearly 2 years. What he didn't know was that I had been his silent savior in the making, preparing a $15 million investment to keep his dream afloat. That morning, after yet another humiliating encounter, I made a decision. I walked out. Alina called after me, but I didn't turn around. I had work to do. I reflected on how quickly our relationship had evolved. We met at a biotech conference in Boulder. She spoke with such fire and intellect about gene therapy that I forgot I was there to scout investment opportunities. Our romance was fast and passionate. 18 months later, we married. Her father hated everything about me. My quiet demeanor, my lack of flashy credentials, my vague job descriptions. He wanted a son-in-law he could boast about. What he never knew was that Amberlin Ventures, my firm, was an engine of discrete power in the investment world. We built tech empires behind closed doors, avoided headlines, and thrived in anonymity. Robert's disdain had never affected me until I saw how it changed Alina. She stopped defending me, stopped seeing me. 3 weeks before that final breakfast, I'd attended Elena's birthday dinner. Robert brought his brother-in-law Harold, a heart surgeon with more money than taste. They spent the evening flaunting boats and Aspen homes. When Harold turned to me for my contribution, Robert pounced. He painted me as the underachiever, the man his daughter settled for. And again, Alina said nothing. In that moment, it clicked. Her silence wasn't from fear. It was agreement. Maybe not full, but enough. Back home, I reviewed the Nexera Labs portfolio. Everything was in place. All I had to do was sign. Instead, I called James Morrison, my lawyer, and instructed him to draft the withdrawal. I would pull my funding, let Robert flail. When Alina returned home days later, the tension was immediate. She mentioned her father's regret and suggested a dinner to smooth things over. I asked her a simple question: how long had she been ashamed of me? She denied it, but I pressed. She chose her father's comfort over my dignity, time and again. Her apology meant little. That night, she left. I knew she wouldn't return. The next day, at exactly 10 a.m., James delivered the withdrawal documents to Nexera Labs. That same hour, I received a call from Alina. Her voice trembled. Their lead investor had vanished. $15 million gone. She asked if I could ask around, maybe, help trace the anonymous group. I told her I'd see what I could do. Later that evening, I scheduled 3 messages to be sent the following morning, one to Alina, one to Robert, and one to be delivered by James, confirming my identity as the silent investor. But before that, I needed closure. I called Patricia Webb, a respected scientist and former colleague of Alina's. She had left Nexera around the same time Alina did. I asked for her honest opinion of Robert. Patricia didn't hold back. Robert had ignored months of stability, testing and warnings about an unstable compound. Alina authored a 20-page memo warning of failure. Robert dismissed it. When the FDA rejected the product, he blamed Alina, ruined her work environment, and forced her out. That was the man who had called me worthless. I spent the night reviewing files, confirming Robert's pattern of failure. It wasn't just arrogance. It was willful ignorance. The next morning, I called Alina. I told her the truth, that I was the investor, that I had pulled the funding. Her silence echoed. She called it cruel. I called it justice. After Alina hung up, I expected anger, but not silence. The rest of the day passed without another call. No texts, no messages, just quiet. It was the kind of silence that screamed. I knew her well enough to know she was unraveling everything in her mind, dissecting every moment of our marriage, every conversation, every lie by omission. I had given her 5 years of love, loyalty, and protection, but she never once stood between me and the wolves. That evening, I returned to the house we once shared. Her perfume lingered in the hallway, subtle and haunting. I poured myself a drink and stood in the study, staring at the bookshelves we'd filled together. Half were gone now. She had packed with surgical precision, leaving empty spaces that mirrored the void between us. The next morning brought chaos. James forwarded me a news alert. Nexera Labs had announced the sudden loss of a key investor. The article mentioned layoffs, restructuring, and emergency meetings. It painted a picture of a company in freefall. I leaned back in my chair and read the piece twice, then 3 times. The satisfaction I felt wasn't vindictive. It was clarity. I wasn't punishing Robert. I was removing my support from someone who never deserved it. By noon, I received a surprise visitor, Alina. Her eyes were puffy, her expression unreadable. She stood in the doorway like she was asking permission to be part of my life again. I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "I need to understand," she said, her voice raw. "You invested in Nexera, knowing it was my father's company." I considered it. I never finalized it. I was waiting, observing. Observing what? You, him, us. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. "I never knew you could be this cold. Cold, no. Strategic. There's a difference." She turned, her anger finally surfacing. "You let him humiliate you for years, then used your money to crush him. He humiliated you too. Remember why you left Nexera. He destroyed your work, your credibility, your peace. You still defend him." Her mouth opened, but no words came. She backed away slowly, her eyes filled with the weight of guilt. Then she left. 2 days passed. Robert hadn't called again. I assumed he was busy trying to salvage what he could. Patricia sent me an email saying she heard Alina had cut ties with her father. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The damage was already done. But that weekend, I received something unexpected. A package. No return address. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. Elena's handwriting filled every page. It was a journal. Our entire relationship chronicled from her point of view. I read it in one sitting. She had loved me, truly. But she was torn, trapped between loyalty to her father and love for her husband. She feared his disapproval more than she'd ever admitted. Her silence wasn't agreement. It was survival. She wrote of sleepless nights, of wanting to protect me, but not knowing how, of praying I would one day understand. I closed the journal and sat in stillness. Her pain was real, but so was mine. I drafted a letter that night. No email, no text, a handwritten response. I didn't know if it would make things better or worse. I just knew it had to be said. I acknowledged her conflict, her suffering. But I also told her that silence has consequences, that love without defense is not enough. I left the letter in her mailbox and walked away without looking back. The next week, Nexera laid off another wave of employees. Their remaining facilities were under review by creditors. Robert's empire was crumbling. And still, I felt no joy in his fall. Only a quiet finality. I didn't tell anyone I had moved on. I simply packed my files, shut the doors on my Denver office, and booked a one-way ticket to Portland. Samuel stared at the flickering flames inside the marble fireplace of his Denver penthouse. The firelight danced across the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the dark expanse of the city. Beyond the glittering skyline, nothing felt solid anymore. Not the deals he built his empire on, not the partners he had trusted for over a decade, and certainly not the one person who had shattered his sense of control. Isabella. The silence of the room was thick. It had been days since Isabella's betrayal became more than a suspicion. It was now a fully documented truth. The encrypted files his cybersecurity consultant decrypted revealed wire transfers linked to shell companies that led directly to Isabella's name. She had been draining funds from their most secure joint trust, the trust Samuel had set aside for their future, their family. He had watched her on surveillance footage, her smile genuine, her laughter warm, her touch still as electric as when they first met. But it was all a facade. The woman who had shared his bed and whispered her dreams against his skin at night was also the one dismantling his legacy, one silent transaction at a time still. He hadn't confronted her. Not yet. He needed to know why. He turned to his desk, where a red leather-bound journal lay open. Inside were sketches and notes about every move he had made in the last 6 months. Names, accounts, patterns. But the one question he couldn't answer wasn't in the pages. Why did she betray him outside? Thunder rolled in over the mountains across town. Isabella sat alone in the corner booth of an upscale jazz bar, her hand wrapped around a glass of scotch she hadn't touched. Her phone buzzed for the 3rd time, but she didn't look. She couldn't. Her heart thudded with guilt. The plan had spiraled beyond her control. What began as a desperate attempt to protect her dying brother from a syndicate's threats had grown into a complicated maze of lies. She never intended to hurt Samuel. She never wanted to, but they had threatened to kill Alex if she didn't funnel the money. And when she tried to back out, they sent her pictures. Bloody clear. Alex on the floor with a gun to his head. She couldn't tell Samuel. He was ruthless when crossed. If he found out, he would go after them. He would destroy them. And in doing so, get himself killed. She couldn't risk it. She chose silence and compliance. But now, Samuel knew. A sleek black car pulled up outside the jazz bar. The driver walked in and handed Isabella a note. One line written in Samuel's sharp handwriting. Rooftop. Now she followed the man upstairs to the rooftop garden of the hotel. Samuel stood there in the rain. No umbrella, suit soaked, tie loose around his neck. He didn't move when she approached. Isabella's voice trembled. Samuel, I never meant for any of this to happen. You have to believe me. Samuel turned slowly. His eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. I gave you everything. My trust, my future, my name. And you turned it into leverage for criminals. It's not like that. They threatened my brother. I didn't know what else to do. You should have come to me. Couldn't. You would have gone after them, and they would have killed him. I was trying to protect you both. Samuel stepped closer. The rain blurred his vision, but not his resolve. So you chose to lie instead. You let me build an empire on raw tears, mingled with the rain on Isabella's face. I chose to protect life over money, over pride. He laughed bitterly. Is that what you think this was about, Isabella? This wasn't pride. This was about loyalty. About knowing who stands beside me when the knives come out. Hand. Who's behind you holding them? She reached for him, but he stepped back. I wanted to fix it. I started moving the money back. I've been cooperating with the FBI. They're building a case against the syndicate. His gaze hardened. And in the meantime, I've been left to wonder which breath was real. Which kiss wasn't poison. There was nothing fake about us. I love you, Samuel. I still do. He said nothing. Just walked past her. The rooftop door slammed shut behind him back in his penthouse. That night, Samuel called his attorney. Every legal trigger he had set up for betrayal was activated. Accounts frozen, assets transferred, names blacklisted. Isabella was now officially cut out of everything. He thought that would feel like justice. But it felt like erasing a part of his soul. Weeks past, Samuel's firm underwent intense scrutiny from regulators. The leak from Isabella's breach had exposed several dormant shell entities, drawing the attention of authorities. Samuel managed to isolate the damage, but barely. His name was no longer clean. And in his world, a tarnished name was a death sentence. Then came the call from Alex. He was in federal protection now. And he wanted to talk. They met at a secure government location. Samuel walked in and saw the young man he had only known from pictures. Pale, thin, but alive. She did everything for me, Alex said. She risked everything. Even you. I begged her to tell you. But she was more afraid of losing you than dying herself. Samuel clenched his fists. Why are you telling me this now? Because she's gone. Samuel's heart stilled. She disappeared 2 nights ago. FBI lost track of her during a transfer. They think the syndicate got to her. Samuel's world tilted. The woman he loved. The woman who betrayed him. The woman who sacrificed everything. Gone. He walked out without another word. That night he stood alone again on his penthouse balcony. The wind cold. The sky empty, but in the darkness behind him, a burner phone buzzed. A single message appeared. You were never supposed to find out this way. The sender was unknown. But the voice in his head whispered her name. The night before the final board vote, Samuel stood alone in his office, the skyline of Denver ablaze with golden light. He didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Not until everything was stripped bare. Not until the ghosts had names and the silence had answers. He looked at the portrait of his mother hanging on the far wall. She had once told him, the deepest betrayals never come from enemies, Samuel. He turned away. It was time. At dawn, he drove to the Waverly estate, where Evelyn had been staying since the public implosion. Olivia answered the door with tired eyes and a white robe. "She's not here," she said simply. "She left last night." Samuel's stomach twisted. "Left where?" Olivia shrugged. "The lie too fragile to hold." Samuel walked past her without asking. He knew Evelyn wouldn't go without a trace. He found her note in the guest bedroom. A simple folded page. No tears, no perfume, just her handwriting. "Samuel, some truths need space to breathe. I need space. Don't come after me. Don't make this part of your war. Let me go. E. He held the note for a long time. Then he folded it again and slipped it into his coat pocket. The board meeting was chaos. Charles hadn't shown up, but his legal team did, armed with a thick binder of accusations, counterclaims, and affidavits. Samuel sat in silence as they presented their evidence. But then he stood. He placed his phone on the table and pressed play. A voice recording played loud and clear. "Charles, the money moves through an Argentinian shell first. That way Evelyn's name stays clean. We give her the illusion of control, but really, it's all just insurance. If she breaks ranks, she takes the fall, not us." Gasps around the table. No one spoke. The lawyers exchanged panicked glances. Samuel tossed a signed affidavit onto the table, courtesy of a former banker in Zurich. Then another wire transfer confirmations. Evelyn had not just been betrayed. She had been used. When the vote came, Charles was stripped of all power. Samuel was named acting chairman, but victory felt hollow. He drove to the edge of the city that night, far past the corporate towers and glimmering condos, out to where the foothills breathed in quiet. He didn't find Evelyn, but he found her voice again. On his voicemail, "I knew you'd expose him. I just didn't think you'd do it alone. Or for me. I don't know what that makes us, Samuel. Maybe we broke too much along the way. But if there's anything left of you for real, I'd like to meet him someday. Somewhere quiet. No suits, no secrets. Just us." It took 2 weeks. But he found her. She was living in a small coastal town in Oregon, using her mother's maiden name, working at a bookshop, living like the world had never burned. He entered the shop with nothing but her letter in his hand. She looked up. "You came. You left." "I had to." "So did I," he said. "From all of it." She nodded slowly. They stood in silence. Then she asked, "Do you still have the ring?" He reached into his coat pocket and took it out. The same ring he'd once given her, in Paris. "This time," he said, "no lies." She stepped forward and placed her hand in his. "Then this time," she whispered, "yes." As they walked out of the shop into the misty Oregon morning, a man sat in a parked car across the street. Watching he raised a phone to his ear. "They're together." "You were right." A voice on the other end answered with a slow chuckle. "Then it's time." The line went dead, and the screen faded to black.